You're listening to the Business Communicators.
Joining us now on the Business Communicators is Diana Doukas, the manager for economic impact for U.S. policy programs at Facebook, where she works with the company's policy goals and how the platform can empower small businesses. And prior to joining Facebook, Diana served as the director of the White House Business Council under President Obama, where she worked closely with business leaders from Fortune 500 companies, as well as the small and medium enterprises, and as White House liaison to the U.S. Small Business Administration. Diana, that was a mouthful, but thank you so much for joining us on the podcast this week.
Good morning, and thanks so much for having me.
You joined Facebook, what was it, in September, October 2019, just a few months before the COVID-19 pandemic really rattled, the world. How dramatically did your role shift when the country shut down in March of 2020?
That's a good question, and a little hard to tell, to be honest. So I had been at Facebook for maybe about 4 to 5 months at that point, and you're still getting your feet wet, finding the bathrooms, trying not to get distracted by if there are free cookies around, and really just trying to figure out where your desk is. But one of the reasons that I decided to join Facebook when this opportunity came up, that I'm so lucky to have, is because of their long-term commitment to small businesses. So for over 10 years, Facebook has really committed resources, people, human capital to supporting small businesses. We are honored that over 200 million businesses use our platforms across the globe every month. And so we have a responsibility to make sure that especially the small business community is supported in using our platforms. And especially as we create new products and adapt, we want to make sure that small businesses are right there with us. So I was very excited about that opportunity, but then, as you said, so there was lots to learn, lots to do, but then COVID hit. And so the role actually, and the massive cross-functional effort that had already existed at Facebook became a little bit even more intense and heightened in our responsibilities.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Give us a peek inside about your initial response to COVID. I mean, how did the team, focus on developing tools, resources, and trainings for small business owners?
Sure. So I think from the beginning of the crisis, even when there were just really whispers of when and where it was going to happen in the US, we were keeping an eye on it, and we knew that we had to act. I mean, there was no opportunity or choice to sit on the sidelines. And so we were going to play whatever role that we could. And so we just jumped right in. And so we established a $100 million grant program for small businesses that were affected by COVID. And that was a global program. And we allocated about $40 million for the United States, and really making sure that we were getting capital into people's hands as quickly as possible, and also providing them ad credits. Because we also know that if you're using the platforms, which was not a criteria for to be eligible for the grants, we wanted to make sure that we were helping every small business, not just those who are on our platform, but knowing that potentially having that extra reach and extra help was important, but getting that fundamental cash and capital immediately into people's hands was really important. We also knew that people were going to transition online. And so how do we make that easier for people, especially in this era of social distancing and banishing storefronts? People were going to transition online, and that was going to be the way that they really look to sustain their operations and hopefully grow. But how do they do that? And so we created a business resource hub where it was a one-stop shop for small businesses, and it still exists, but it's a one-stop shop to help with, sector by sector guides. And so if you were a restaurant or you were in the wellness sector, how do you transition? How do you best use our platforms and other resources to make sure that you're sustaining, reaching your customers, et cetera? We also featured content from external partners. And so whether it was a local chamber of commerce or the Small Business Administration, we wanted, again, be a one-stop shop for folks. And then it also had links to our free educational resources. And this is something that we've been doing for over 10 years, is providing free content and support for small businesses to really learn how to best use our platforms and the products that we have to best suit their needs. And so there still are the links to this curriculum, but then also we've invested in something called Boost with Facebook, where before COVID, our teams were crisscrossing the country and really meeting small businesses where they are, both in comfort level in terms of the content for working on our platforms. And so whether or not a small business was new to the platform and didn't know how to either set up your Instagram page or a reel or your Facebook page, really addressing that need, but then also to those who were a little bit more comfortable and had a more sophisticated online presence, and really showing how to use our personalized advertising tools. So how do we take that really invaluable resource and bring it online? And so that's exactly what we did. We really started honing in and keeping these events as local as possible, because every community is different. Everyone is feeling something different. Everybody's needs are different. And so we still now virtually crisscross the country, providing these resources and these small business trainings, our Boost with Facebook trainings, as wherever people will have us. We are showing up and making sure to give opportunities for small businesses to learn. But then I will also say that we establish new products. And so while people will take the Boost trainings and now learn how to use the products, but what are those products? And so we created gift cards so that communities could really support their local businesses. There were temporary service changes opportunities. And so a business could go onto their profile and make sure their customers know how to best reach them, whether your operations had changed from in-person to delivery, you're a dry cleaner, are you closed, what are your protocols, really a communications effort, really, again, to make sure that your community knew if you were okay, and then knew how to help you and support you, because you saw such a rallying around small businesses during the COVID crisis of making sure no one wanted to lose their local restaurant, their haunt, right? Everyone wanted to chip in and be a part of that community. And then we established something called Facebook and Instagram shops, which essentially is taking your physical presence, your physical storefront, and doing our best to bring it online and creating that virtual storefront. And what's great about Instagram and Facebook shops is that it's fully customizable. So you can actually, as a small business, bring your personality online. And we really established it so that it felt like a seamless experience for your customers. So if you're going in person and and you're saying, I want this top, here's my credit card, here you go, it's one and done. We're trying to do the exact same thing on Facebook and Instagram shops to keep that as seamless as possible. So there was an entire massive effort across the company, enhanced by also people just raising their hands to say, how can we help? People who don't have small business necessarily in their portfolio were jumping in and saying, using their own entrepreneurial spirit to help America's entrepreneurs.
We saw that here in Houston, even going back to 2017 with Hurricane Harvey. I mean, when so many people lost their homes, or knew people that lost their homes, they were turning to Facebook groups to try to figure out how to, rebuild, how to, have help cleaning out their homes. And so it's really cool to see the platform when, it can be used for good. But specifically with IBC and IBC Houston, so we've got a mix of diverse communicators, many of which are entrepreneurs here in the state. And in Texas particularly, we've got 45% of jobs are small business related, and they employ more than 4.7 million people in our state. So nearly, 18 months into the pandemic, what has changed about the state of small business in this country, and in particular here in Texas?
And actually, it's something that we also started at the beginning of the pandemic, was to create something called the State of Small Business Report, because it's not just enough for us to think we know how to best address the needs of the community and what people are facing and what small businesses are going through, but also to actually hear from small businesses themselves to better understand what that looks like, where their challenges are, how we can help, and hopefully provide some data. So not only that Facebook can show up in our best, anybody in nonprofits, really, that they can say, okay, this is a challenge, and where can we step up and where can we help? And so our most recent iteration of the State of Small Business, April, and it actually showed Texas doing pretty well. Texas small businesses remain operational at that point, and which was actually 3 points higher than the national average. And 83% of women-owned businesses were operational, which was actually 8 points higher than the national average. And so, you were seeing, your small businesses in Texas, turning to however, whether it was online, whether it was able to keep a hybrid of services, your Texas small businesses really showed up and rallied around one another to make it work and make it through the pandemic. I will say, and I do want to add though, that as of April, 69% of Texas small businesses feel confident that if the environment sustained or it stayed and circumstances stayed the way that they were in April, 69% felt comfortable that they would be able to survive in the next 6 months. And so that also shows how people are trying to take their resources and understand how they're going to get through whatever the changing dynamics may be, year over year or time after time.
In a prior podcast, I was talking about the importance of agile working and focusing on, internal communications when you're working with remote workers. And then we have those that are kind of slowly transitioning back to the office. What has been, I would like to ask, is the biggest lesson learned from the pandemic that you're hearing from small businesses about communicating to stakeholders and employees? And I'd even like to know, what has Facebook learned?
So I think for small businesses, I think we've always known that communication with your audiences and communication with your customers has always been incredibly important. It's how you're going to stay relevant. It's how you're going to stay top of mind. But then also allows for you to bring in new customers, to bring in new audiences. And actually, this is where we've seen our personalized advertising tools actually help support small businesses at the same time, because you're able as a small business to use these personalized advertising tools and find your new audiences. And so if you're a cupcake business and I'm looking to help send a happy gift to a friend who either just got a promotion or has a baby or something like that, I want to be able to find my local small business and support them. And how is the small businesses using these personalized advertising tools? And then they're communicating with me, and then we understand we're part of this community, and supporting one another. And so using our those tools have been really important to bring in new customers and to sustain operations. I will say from Facebook's perspective, I couldn't be more blessed, I would say, for how seriously and generously the company has approached this. We have been really lucky to have almost not over communication in a bad way, but over communication in a good way. It's very important for folks to just kind of know where they stand, and have the ability to ask questions, to ask tough questions. I will say with my team, I'm an over communicator to begin with, and so that's one thing. But I think it's also a lesson learned that we're all human and we're all managing so many different things all at the same time. And so, of course, while you want to show up as your best self when you're in the office and where you're working with colleagues, sometimes you really can't help it when your dog just starts barking uncontrollably and you have to finish a presentation and just pretend like that's not happening. Or, you see some random things happening in the background for a colleague and you're like, oh, I know exactly how they're feeling right now, but we're just going to keep going. And I think it's allowed all of us to see each other as real people and just have that. I feel like there's actually been a little bit more of a bond in that, because we've all been experiencing this together, not similarly. We all are experiencing this differently, but I think it's allowed for a little bit more of a humanizing bond, I would say. And I hope that that's something that continues.
Absolutely. I'm just curious. I was looking at your profile, and you got an opportunity to work with President Obama and my forever First Lady. And I kind of wanted to know, what's the difference in working with the President of the United States or the President of Facebook? What is different for you? Unique.
I would actually say that I've actually found more similarities in working in the administration and working at Facebook than I would have thought. And the reason I say that is because they are both they are both entities that can have significant impact on individuals, on your individual life, how people experience one another. Both the government and Facebook are trying to create opportunities for individuals and for businesses. They're trying to better the human experience, and you have the ability to have have a positive impact in a really important way. And so I actually have found, and I will also say that there are scores of teams working on so many different things, but all with that point or that North Star of doing something good. That is exactly how it was in the government, where obviously you have so many different agencies and different subcommittees and things like that, everyone trying to do their best for the American people. And we're doing the exact same thing here at Facebook. There's so many different teams working on really cool, innovative, entrepreneurial things, and just trying to make a better impact for folks. And so I actually see more similarities than not.
Well, if you look at the population of Facebook, it's quite larger than the population of the United States, with kind of rivaling China and India with nearly 2 billion users on the platform. But Diana, when we're talking about like innovation and creativity, I actually thought that was one of the cool things that I saw in 2020 from a lot of small businesses, whether it was embracing video calls, Instagram Live, Facebook Live. And in particular, there's actually a wine shop here in Houston, and it's actually where I proposed to my fiance. It's called Vinology. And when Texas shut down in March of 2020, part of their business was bringing in winemakers and having these like in-person wine tastings. Well, they couldn't do that anymore. So they decided they were going to ship bottles, or actually drive bottles to people's homes. And then they were going to be doing Facebook Live every Friday night with a winemaker talking about the wine history. And I thought it was so innovative for them to, not fold, but really look at it as an opportunity to say, okay, how can we pivot our business? I saw musicians do Facebook live streams, Instagram live streams, and then put their Venmo and PayPal accounts up. And some people were making more money doing that than they were actually being inside a bar and performing live in front of an audience. So when we're taking all of this into consideration, and I know right now Texas is pretty much reopened and businesses are sort of getting back to normal, but some of them are still utilizing some of that same technology that they really embraced in 2020. So taking all that into consideration, what digital media or technology tools from the last year do you think are here to stay?
First, I'll say congratulations on your engagement. It's very exciting.
Well, thank you.
And second, I think you raise a really great point where even at the scariest moments of the pandemic, when everyone is just, what is this? How are we going to survive? The human condition, people are just really creative, and people are going to find a way to make it work. And so to your point of being able to host concerts or art shows or even dance parties on Instagram or Facebook Live, and bringing people together in that community and for commerce, I think is just a testament to how creative people can be, especially when they need to be. But what is that opportunity there? I think when we're thinking about digital trends moving forward, I think when we're going to move into this kind of hybrid life, I think that there has been a trend moving much more towards e-commerce, the digitization of that experience, and I don't think that genie is being put in back in the bottle. And I think that that's it provides an opportunity for you not only to reach the people as a small business, to reach the people who are immediately in your driving distance, but across the country, across the globe. It's opening opportunities. And so as small businesses have found more success online, the hope is for them to continue to expand on that, to see what those opportunities are, and whether they look to cross-border opportunities or exporting or other, or if you're in Texas, if even if it's just across the border. And so what does that look like? I also think that video conferencing is probably also here to stay. I think all of a sudden it went from, oh my gosh, can you see this wrinkle or this, the food on my face, up and close in Zoom, or, on Workplace, and our portals, which is a Facebook product, is Portal, which we've used quite often. People being very nervous, to people just understanding that this is this is the opportunity, and this is how we're going to make this work, and actually having a lot of ease at that. And I also think, and to your point about the classes and the virtual opportunities to taste wine, the opportunity to bring in experts from across the globe in their field and bring them to you in a more local and personalized way, I think that's just incredibly exciting. And so if you are a winemaker and you own a vineyard in France or in Sicily or Long Island, where I'm from, and you have the opportunity to talk with enthusiasts, to learn, to have a conversation, I think that's just an incredible opportunity that I hope will continue.
It's the access to information that I think is just, incredible. But I don't know, we actually talked about Zoom calls and hoping that, maybe there is a rule moving forward that not every call has to be video. So we'll see if that continues. Yeah. And just a little peek behind the curtain for our listeners. Hattie beforehand was like, "Oh, Austin, I like your shirt. You look like you're dressed up." I'm like, "Hattie, I'm wearing like shorts underneath, so we're good." So,
he told off on himself.
Yeah, I just had to be transparent for the audience here. But Diana, we've got a few more questions left for you. But from a digital perspective, we've already discussed 2020 and just how incredible it was from a content perspective, and we saw the rise of so many different new platforms. We saw like TikTok that came out of nowhere in 2020, Clubhouse late 2020. An audio only app came out of nowhere, and Facebook and Twitter continue to pivot and add new offerings to their platforms as well. But through that all, there are still, some privacy concerns, and misinformation, continue to be a part of the conversation. And I know it's difficult for companies to monitor this, and there's a lot of political debate on should companies be liable, should they not be liable, and it really depends on which state or which country you're in. But what is Facebook doing, maybe with small businesses or just as a company to maybe make the platform more of a safe place in comparison to maybe other platforms or where Facebook was even just a year ago?
So it's a great question. And so, we take the spread of information, misinformation very seriously. And so we have taken significant steps to remove content that violates our community standards. And we operate by, exactly like removing content. We reduce the content that doesn't directly violate the community standards, but nonetheless is misinformation. We also inform people, and we give them more context so people can decide for themselves what to read and to trust and really to understand. You will have seen, if you've used the platforms, you will have seen we had a COVID information hub, and so there were opportunities for you as a business owner, as a user, to find authoritative information for your local community on COVID, on the status and what your community was going through. Same with vaccines opportunity. And so we really want to make sure that we're helping connect you with the authoritative information. So again, you can make decisions for yourselves. And also protecting people's privacy is the right thing to do as we're thinking about the more time people are spending online. That's incredibly important to Facebook. And so we're always working on continuing to keep our community safe, people's information safe. It's our responsibility, especially as people have looked to the platforms and e-commerce in general on, exchanging financial information, and you're making money. We have to get this right. And that's our guiding North Star.
I think it's funny to see how people have become more and more comfortable with social media platforms. I mean, I think back to 2006 when my cell phone actually broke, and my mom wouldn't give me like the last 4 digits of her social security number so I could go to AT&T and buy a replacement on my own. And now she shares all this stuff on social media. But if I'm making one request for you, Diana, is there a way that you can call Mark and see if he can put the band hammer on my aunt, Carol? I mean, that would just be so great for the misinformation she spreads on the platform. No, I'm just kidding. But Hattie, I'm laughing a little bit, probably too much, but I'll turn it over to you for the last question.
Okay, fine. We have had a past podcast guest, Axios media reporter, Sarah Fisher, who is really good. And she is very positive and speaks about the power of Facebook and whether or not digital platforms are net good for democracy. She mentions everything that you do good, and you did as well, elevating nonprofits, helping small businesses, driving social impact issues. But she also mentioned that about the weaponization of social media by bad actors and rogue regimes to silence critics or even their own citizens. Facebook has made some really positive steps to address many of these concerns, but what we want to know is what policies will be in place moving forward to mitigate this and truly make social media and make the community a safe place.
Sure. And I think it's, certainly mentioning how we're tackling misinformation is incredibly important. And again, there are teams that are working on this day and night to make sure that people's privacy, decrease the spread of misinformation on the platforms, that is, again, that North Star, so we can make sure that we're having a safe environment for people on the platform. And I think we have seen such a rapid escalation of people using social media, the internet overall, over the last 10 years. And, e-commerce, I think, has grown 3 times in the last 10 months than it had in any previous period as we were tracking. Not we, but, as people were paying attention to the rise of e-commerce. And so it's really hard to predict exactly what the next scenario is. What is the internet going to look like in the next year, 2 years, 5 years? I think it's really hard to predict, but I think there are a couple of key principles that we will continue to hold true, which first is transparency. Transparency to us is incredibly important, and it is our overarching theme. We want people to have, as I mentioned, access to authoritative information. We want to make sure that people can continue to share their thoughts and opinions, but also make sure that they can do a quick check, source that information and make sure that they can inform themselves on what's available and what's out there. And I think, but you raise a really good point. And so the internet hasn't been, regulations for the internet haven't been updated in over 25 years. And so what does that look like? What is the next step? We've actually been one of the first companies to embrace, calling for updated rules for the internet. We are certainly a very willing partner to inform lawmakers and the broader community on how we can, best update the rules of the road, as we're all looking to communicate and exist in this, next step of social media and the internet writ large. So it's a great question, and we are incredibly dedicated to making sure that we figure it out.
I think Section 230 is going to be really interesting, and this is something that our co-host Thomas has really been harping on for us to, have a full episode to discuss. So that we'll save that for a different time. But for our listeners out there, I would just encourage you to embrace technology. It's here to stay. Use the platforms, be aware of the new platforms and the new trends, what companies are doing to release information to help you do your job better, more efficient, and to reach a broader audience. There's a company, a small business here in Houston. It's called Margarita Mercantile, and Selena Villarreal, she's the owner of it. She pivoted from going to pop-up shops every single weekend to really embracing Instagram. She grew her platform to over 10,000, followers just as a few months ago, and now she's reached a broader audience globally. She ships all around the world now, so it's just incredible to see the success stories that have come from this. But Diana, thank you so much for joining us on the Business Communicators podcast. And for our listeners out there, maybe they want to learn more about the Facebook resources that are available to them. What is the best way for them to find out about that, or perhaps get in touch with you to follow up with additional questions they might have?
Absolutely. So first, thank you so much for having me. This was a great conversation, and glad for it to continue. So we certainly have many different ways that small businesses can access any of our resources, but 2 opportunities that I think are really special are support groups. So we have a Boost with Facebook US group where small businesses can easily join, and they get additional support, additional resources, or just an easier way to find, ways that we can help them. So if folks want to go to Boost with Facebook US, once you go to facebook.com, so facebook.com, Boost with Facebook US. And then we also have something called the Boost Leaders Network, where small businesses can join this more, a little bit more of a tailored group to understand additional resources and support that we have, and a community. And so I hope that many of your small businesses who are listening will join us. And of course, if there's any opportunities for us to enhance or improve our products and experience, of course, we are more than open to figuring out how we can serve you better.
Well, that's great information. And for our listeners out there, we've got a lot of, entrepreneurs that listen to this podcast. We'll drop the link to that in our show notes below. So just scroll down on your phone or, wherever you're listening to this podcast right now and click on that, and you can learn more about the different resources that Facebook has. But Diana, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Business Communicators.